Hello, this is Lori Tom, and welcome to the Rainbows and Unicorns Editing and Revision Oh My video. I love editing and revision. I'm one of those weird souls, but I know a lot of people don't. So hopefully after you watch this, you will join me in the land of loving revision and editing. Let me give you a little bit of a glimpse of what my writing life looks like. Part of my process is actually avoiding the writing process. And really for me, this is drafting, this is thinking. I might do things like reorganize my kitchen, bake a cake, go on Facebook, plan a summer vacation, micromanage my daughter's life, things like that, all in the spirit of avoiding writing. But my wheels are turning in my head. I sit down to write. I may be on the computer. I may be in my journal if it's just a baby idea just starting out. When I get a pretty solid piece, I'll start revising. Then I'll move to editing, and I'll kind of circle through those three stages: writing, revising, editing quite a bit. I do that as long as I need to, and then I publish it. And publishing might be sharing it with my family of writers classes, sharing it on my blog, sharing it with my daughter or my husband or even my dog. That's a little bit of my writing life. It is kind of a rainbows and unicorns experience. I love writing. It makes me feel happy. But I'm 54 years old. I've been doing this for a while. I know what works for me, and I'm comfortable in the struggling parts. And I want to get all of you to a place like that too. But still, I know that when people get to revising and editing, it can feel like a root canal, or they think it's going to feel like a root canal from past experiences of writing from their own school life. I want to work to change that for you. And then hopefully you can, no matter what kind of school experience your kids are having with writing, you can help your kids, kind of have a rainbows and unicorns experience with writing too. So the first thing we need to look at are just some tips for getting into the rainbows and unicorn frame of mind. First of all, you actually need to get a hold of some writing. In elementary school, the things I'm going to talk to you about right now are gold, even if you don't have some writing coming home. So what I would do, if you're in Family of Writers, you've got pieces that you've done with me in our class. You use those. If you're not in Family of Writers, go on my website. There's some writing recipes that you can follow together as a family. They don't take a lot of time. Like literally, they take 15 minutes to do. If you're stepping in to help your child edit and revise a piece of writing, it's really good to plan ahead. If you do this the night before, you have invited drama. And I don't think that's a good thing. The other thing I would say, it is such a smart idea to invest in some way to help your kids learn how to type really fast. It just saves so much time, especially when you get to the editing and revision part. Let your kids own their own writing. Don't just take their piece in your hand and go at it with a red pen, because then you're taking ownership of it. I really try never to write on a student's piece of paper. I might have Post-its. If I'm really pressed for time, I will make a copy of the paper and do some writing, but that original piece I never write on. And your kids also have to own the revisions they're going to make. We're in the business of making some suggestions, but not commands. The best way to get your kids open to revision and editing is if you are too, and ask for help with revision and editing. That's you taking a risk. It makes it comfortable for them to do so as well. Nurture the process more than the piece. You're teaching the writer, not the writing. Your kids have many, many pieces of writing ahead of them in their lives. Your goal here is to help them identify the process of writing that works well for them, especially in this revision and editing stage. If your child is fighting you and resisting you and doesn't want to do this, get a surrogate, which would be a tutor. Show them this video. Show them the downloadable one-page cheat sheet that I've made available on this very topic as well, and have them do this business with them. That is something that our family has done, and it has saved us. So I can't encourage that strongly enough. There's something you really need to understand before you start helping your kid with writing. Revision and editing are different. Revision addresses content, organization, structure, craft. It addresses the meaning of the piece. Editing, it's all the mechanics. It's the spelling, the punctuation, the grammar. These are two very, very different things. They work together, and they're all helping your reader understand the meaning of a piece, but you kind of address them separately. And a lot of studies have shown people who write well kind of separate these two things. They separate revision, they separate editing. Students who really struggle with writing think that revision and editing is really just editing. And a lot of times they're getting that from their teachers, because a lot of teachers are not comfortable with writing themselves, but they're really comfortable with how to tell you which there to spell. We have to fight that a little bit, because you're taking a risk, you're writing with your kids, you're going to get this. You're going to see this if you go through the revision process yourself. The other thing to keep in mind is keep revision as simple as possible. And I'm super thankful to a great writing teacher. He's written a lot of books. His name is Ralph Fletcher. And he's just made it so simple. There are 5 acts of revision. Add something, change something, move something, delete something, or start over. Oh, I don't like that one, but sometimes you have to. Trust that your kid will know what needs to be done on their pieces. The ultimate goal is you're trying to teach someone to be their own editor and reviser, because a lot of times in college or wherever, they're going to be on their own. They're not going to have a parent there. But in this initial time of trying to figure out this process, you got to trust that they know how to do this, even if they don't. You act like they do, and you say to them when they've said, I have no idea what I need to do, my revision or editing, and you say, you know what? Just act like you do. If you think you knew what you would need to do, what would you do? And I've done this countless times with students, and it always comes up that they really do have some sense of a part, at least, of their piece that isn't working. And maybe you can articulate what's not working there, but they do know where it is not working in their pieces. The supplies you need for this process, I'm going to take you through the steps right now. Copies of the pieces. And I like to have 2 copies, one for the writer, one for the listener. If they're typed already, that just really saves time when you have to get in and make changes. But if they're not, that's okay. Post-its. I love writing little notes on Post-its as I listen to a writer and I have ideas come to me for revision, and then we can put them in the piece, or they're just wonderful. And then Skittles, and you'll see why. Step 1, start with fabulous. The writer reads the piece out loud, and the listener says back a golden line. And this would be a group of words or a whole sentence that really stands out to you, that you think this is good writing. And the listener says that out loud. It's also really good for the writer to identify what they love as their golden line. And sometimes those are the same thing, and sometimes they're not. When you first start working on revision with a student, and notice I'm starting with revision first, not editing, kind of gauge how they're feeling about this. Is drama brewing? You know, if this is the only step you can get to in these first tries, that's good. Stop there and move on. But this is the one you do not skip. Step 2, you're going to enter the land of revision gently. The writer reads his piece aloud. And you may wonder, why don't we just sit side by side and we have the red pen out all over the paper and don't read it out loud? You will notice the writer, as they're reading things out loud, they'll stop and make some edits. They'll see a word misspelled and they'll correct it. So you want that to happen. Hearing the words out loud and feeling that rhythm of reading it when it's broken, those are really important pieces of data. When a person is reading their piece out loud and they stumble, that is the piece kind of screaming out loud, edit me, something is wrong here, revise here, something is wrong. You as a listener need to have your little Post-it there and, the part where the dog jumped on top of the doghouse, there's something wrong there. Make little notes so you can come back to those things, because it'll really help in the future of this process. Step 3, after you hear the piece, just have a real live conversation with the writer. The listener, if you have heard a place where you just feel like, oh my gosh, there need to be details here, there is not enough information, you don't want to say that. You want to ask a question. So could you tell me more about this part? And the writer will often come back with all these details. And as that writer is given those details, you want to just jot those down on that Post-it. And what you can often say is, we better save this because maybe you will just want to add those to your piece later. I don't know. Maybe you will. Like, I'm not commanding as a listener, but I'm just giving suggestions. Writers are super fragile. They've got this writing there. It's very scary to start changing it. The other thing, if there's a part where you're confused as a listener, you want to say, what did you mean right here? What did you mean here? And again, use those Post-its to take notes. Step 3, this is the go for it moment. This is the big question. What are you going to revise? And the writer is going to come back with the 5 options. I'm going to add something right here and have them point to it and have a conversation. Okay, and how are you going to do it? Do it. Or I'm going to take this part out. Why are you going to do that? Or, oh my gosh, that's a good idea. Whatever conversation comes up, let that conversation happen naturally. I'm going to move this part. I'm going to change this part. I'm going to start all over again. Okay, this is where having time is key. And you repeat those as often as necessary. If you start feeling angst coming from that writer, just let it go for another day. If you're working with an elementary kid, you've got time. There's a lot of writing ahead of them. And again, we're nurturing the process of revision and editing. We are not totally worried about the end project. Yes, we want a great end project, but this process that can grow, that's what's going to create a great writer. Number 4, you do the revisions. This can happen naturally in that conversation when the writer is answering, what are you going to revise? But this is hard work. You can sit on this for 20 minutes, for an hour, for 5 minutes, or 2 days, whatever. It's just going to depend on the writer. I would always not let it go unless there was at least one revision made. Really try to go for that. You want the child or the writer to actually do at least one active revision. This is a luxury step, the let the piece sleep if you have time. It's amazing what you can notice about a piece if you come back to it the next day. So if you have that luxury, great. If you don't, the world won't end. So after the revision is done, you go into the magical land of editing. Editing is not this nemesis enemy. Editing is there as a courtesy to your reader. It's the code that's going to let your reader understand what to do when they're reading and how to understand your meaning. What you want to do when you do editing is, again, like we did for revision, start with fabulous. Find one grammar or punctuation or spelling move that the writer made that was awesome, and then point it out and then say to them, oh my gosh, you can keep doing that in a lot of your writing from here on out. Then step 6, you catch the brain freeze mistakes. Brain freeze mistakes are those silly mistakes that we make, like you forget to capitalize the first word in a sentence or something, and they're the ones you really know. But what happens is when you're composing writing, it's really hard work on your brain, and your brain will just freeze up on these basic things we know. So you got to go through and catch all those and do them together. Who can find the most of those? Then what you want to do is you want to address those mistakes that are really signs of intelligent life. They are the mistakes that are happening because the writer is taking a risk. The writer is trying to learn something new. The writer has decided, oh man, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to have dialogue. And that's a lot of commas and quotations, and they have to go inside, outside, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm going to have a sentence with a colon in it. Da, 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 da. So the listener, often if the listener is the adult, give this one to them free. Applaud them for taking risks. They're never going to learn how to do these things unless they try them. So don't get ticked off at that mistake. Say, yeah, you went for it. Also, if you don't know how to do that, Google it, get a reference book, and show your writer what you do when you don't know how to correct something. Show them how to find those resources. That isn't cheating. That's just plain smarts. Then you print out that final copy and you do Taste the Rainbow proofreading. These are for all the typos, and I guarantee you will always find them. Make it a fun game. Both of you have the piece in front of you, and whoever keeps finding, anytime you find a typo, you get a Skittle or an M&M or whatever. The M&Ms didn't go with my rainbows and unicorns, but I would certainly prefer M&Ms. Anyway, so just make it fun and get your kids in the process of knowing, oh my gosh, there's going to be typos. Now, I've always been told, read it backwards. I'm never patient enough to do that, but if you can, that's great. Then release the piece. Writers need authentic audiences, whether that's like your father, mother, dog, whatever. Someone has to hear that piece. When the dust settles, when there's a natural time to do this, talk about the process. Talk about what really worked and what didn't work. And the things that worked, just say, keep it light, keep it short. Just say, wow, you could do that in another piece in the future. If something didn't work, skip that next time and then move on. People who write well have a process that works for them. And unless you start having these conversations, your kids are never going to be asked to identify their process. And then they're not going to have one that they can fall back on all the time. So that's a really important conversation. Got a quote here from Ralph Fletcher. He says, certain people talk about the writing process as if there is one and only one process for writing. True, there are interesting similarities in how various writers work, but each writer uses a process slightly different from that of other writers. For every writer who works one way, you'll find a writer who works in another. Don't forget to download the one-pager kind of cheat sheet that has these steps so you can just follow along. And that's going to be on my website, and you can download it from there. Thank you so much for listening. There are lots more resources on my website, LoriT.com. If you want to email me, I'm LoriTom@LoriT.com, and I'm on Instagram at LoriStories. So take care and have fun writing.